Welcome everybody, we're going to get started. Last session of the convention. So I have some announcements here. Welcome to the residential designer Trifecta, connecting 2D plans, 3D models, and project management. It's pretty good that I still look at the screens that I came up with the name. Just a few items before we get started. The ASLA 2014 Continuing Education Program is sponsored by Playcorn. If you are tracking professional development hours, please make sure you enter this room through the doors marked in the tracking portal. If you found another way into the room, you're a magician. If you are tracking credits for AIA, CES, or Florida licensure, and Florida licensure I heard is really difficult to get CEUs for, please be sure to sign in and out the attendance sheet on the materials table at the back of the room. You can access your PDH attendance records from the kiosks in the cyber lounge, in A lobby, and in the Mile High Ballroom pre-function area. After the meeting, you can also find your PDH attendance record on the ASLA website. Before you're able to access your record, you will be asked to complete evaluation forms for the sessions you attended. Please provide constructive comments to help ASLA improve education programs for future meetings. The session handouts are available on the ASLA website at the annual meeting mobile app, and they can be printed from the kiosks at the internet lounges. Please silence your cell phones, and photography, audio, and video recordings of the session are prohibited. Attendees can tweet using the ASLA annual meeting Twitter hashtag ASLA 2014. And we're going to get started. My name is Daniel Tal. Thank you for coming to this session. With me, I have Patrick DuChene and Mark Carvalho, and I'll introduce them in a second. And I'm actually going to walk over to here. Can you guys hear me okay? So we're going to talk about a program called DynaSCAPE and what DynaSCAPE is able to do for residential design. There's a lot of landscape architects practicing in the residential design field. And what I like about DynaSCAPE, and I've been working with them for the past several years, is their ability to quantify and to manage business management software as part of the complete package to actually work. And on top of that, also create 3D models. So Patrick DuChene is a landscape designer who owns DuChene Design Solution. He provides landscape design, 3D modeling, animation, and consulting services to the landscape industry. He does a great deal of online webinars and presentations with DynaSCAPE. He travels around, and he does a great deal of educational sessions to landscape architects and landscape designers in terms of how to use this software in a complete way for his own office. I have the honor to present Mark Carvalho. He owns Academy Inc. and provides architectural design and 3D modeling and training and consulting. Even more important, Mark Carvalho was one of the first 6 founders and developers to work on SketchUp back in 1998. I actually learned to use SketchUp from Mark. He was known as the voice of SketchUp. He has videos integrated into SketchUp at the time. And he also does and provides education sessions on SketchUp through DynaSCAPE and Sonata Howell. My name is Daniel Tal, an landscape architect, practicing for 16 years. Been doing a lot of 3D modeling over that time. And I'm the senior designer and manager of the 3D Viz studio at Stanley Consultants. So the objectives of what we're going to go over is we're going to introduce DynaSCAPE and the workflow that they use to actually make DynaSCAPE work for them in terms of their products. We'll go over the basic as well as the unique functionality of what DynaSCAPE does. DynaSCAPE is a series of integrated packages where you can categorize into something also called DynaSCAPE Color, and how you can seamlessly transition from DynaSCAPE into SketchUp modeling, which was an intentional goal of DynaSCAPE to integrate that into the processes. A lot of landscape designers were looking for visualization tools. We're going to demonstrate, and Patrick will show this, how to use Manage 360. It's a business software solution, and I'll show you in more detail how you can leverage your 2D drawing that create all the documentation, cost estimating, quantification you need for your plans directly from DynaSCAPE. And then we're going to show you a process of quickly modeling, or a slide of quickly modeling a DynaSCAPE plan in SketchUp. And also, we're going to touch upon terrain modeling and all the other aspects in which how Mark Carvalho uses DynaSCAPE merged with SketchUp to create some pretty cool drawings as far as we can do with it. So, what is DynaSCAPE? It's a 2D CAD graphical software. You can see on the slide, DynaSCAPE design, and on either side, it gives the ability for things to go to SketchUp or to Manage 360. So you're drafting in 2D, you're leveraging your 2D design, and it's well suited for the landscape design industry in terms of how you can draft in that particular way and then get all this peripheral information. I like to call it cycle information modeling because it's a very loaded term, I know that. But in that context, that's what this aspect of it is. You're taking your 2D drawing, you're using the drafting, you might be using AutoCAD, or in this case, you might be. How many people are DynaSCAPE users already in the crowd? Some of you say no. And how you can quickly quantify and manage your plans to create all the different aspects of the DynaSCAPE in Manage 360 and easily convert that to sketch models. So what is Manage 360? It's one of the business solutions that comes with it. It's a comprehensive business management software. Again, it's specific to the landscape design aspect of residential design. And it's a full sales pipeline management. And Patrick will touch upon that in a lot of detail, and also cost-based estimating. So it allows you, once you start drafting, to really start pulling out your estimating and quantities and areas. And generating those estimates and actually producing your reports using Manage 360. So you can track your work orders, your job progress, manage your timesheets, manage your employees, analyze the job progress and losses using the built-in and best practices process that Manage 360 offers. And of course, having SketchUp models coming out in the audience for people who are interested in SketchUp and 3D modeling. And that's an interesting topic. I talk with a lot of landscape designers and landscape architects using or in that doing residential design and identifying that there's a need, especially for clients or to get ahead of the competition in terms of using 3D modeling to portray your designs quickly and easily. And that's what SketchUp can do. It's an easy program up front. There are some nuances to getting it to work for you in a much more proficient way, but it does have the ability to actually create models for you. The other thing that's nice about what DynaSCAPE offers is something called Sketch 3D. It's over 1,100 or 1,000 actually that we've added to this. We started developing the presentation. Over 1,100 landscape design plant-based components. We'll go over them because they're scientific plant things that are coming in for these plants that are specific to the use of sketch and optimized sketch. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick.
Thanks. Hello, everybody. So, DynaSCAPE Software. DynaSCAPE, some of you may recognize it, some of you may not. In the residential design build industry, it is an industry leader. It is a very dynamic software suite, really. There are several components to it. DynaSCAPE Design, Color, there's the Sketch 3D, and then there's Manage 360, which makes it a very unique software tool for the industry because it allows you to not only design your projects, but it allows you to estimate your projects, propose your projects, manage your projects, and figure out at the end of a project where you made your money, where you lost your money. So you can see why it's such a powerful tool in the design build industry, but it can be very well utilized in the landscape architecture industry, which I know DynaSCAPE is very excited to start becoming part of. So DynaSCAPE Design, this is where it all starts. It's a CAD engine. It runs very similar to AutoCAD. It can import AutoCAD drawings. It can export as an AutoCAD drawing, DWG. So it plays very well with AutoCAD. If I'm sent an AutoCAD drawing, all the layers come with it. When I send a drawing to an engineer or an architect or a landscape architect, all those layers, they go with it too. So it's a very seamless collaboration. So seamless is a big word to me. I run a business that I design for clients all over the country. But I started running about $1.5 million residential design build divisions. And as part of that, I needed to develop a workflow that was systematic. It was all through one pipeline that allowed me to produce work quickly, efficiently, accurately, and profitably. I can't believe I said all that with low oxygen levels in the high altitudes of Colorado. So I'm off to a good start. Okay, so what do? I'm going to take you through the general workflow. There's a lot of tools in DynaSCAPE, but not too many where it is not a bloated software. Anybody can learn this. So where do we start? We open up a new drawing. It gives us plenty of opportunities of different sheet sizes. It's for metric for our Canadian friends where this is based. So I've created what's called a prototype. And what a prototype is the software comes with title blocks, what they're called. You can open a title block, insert logos, any information that you want to come up every single time you open a drawing to reduce redundancy in your workflow. So for this client, he wanted his certifications, his logos, a customer sign-off sheet for the drawing, which I always had clients sign off on drawings, so there's proof that they even knew it existed. And then a copyright note, which says, we own the drawing unless you pay for it. So hopefully everyone in here is charging for the drawings. So we can very quickly insert text. So client name, see if I can spell my name right today, DuChene residence, and as you can see, it is populating as I go. So my address, Reddington Road, so it's already set up to populate these. You don't have to, there is very, very little setup in DynaSCAPE. Layers are set up already to industry standards. In 10 years of using it, I haven't thought once, I need to customize this, because it's all done for you. If you want to customize, that's fine, but you have to decide how much your time is worth. So here's the process. So I open up my prototype. I have a survey from a client. So I bring in my survey from a well-organized file structure. Here's my survey. It's not to scale yet. So I want to scale this so I can do one of two things. I can either do quick takeoffs to give a builder sod square footages or mulch takeoffs or a driveway square footage. And I'm going to enter in a dimension and I'm going to insert it between this point and I'm going to insert it between that point. So what I just told the software is between those 2 points, it's 199 feet. So if I did my job right, I will test this to make sure that I'm accurate. 36.4, I'm close enough for presentation purposes, and we're not performing heart surgery. So I'm close enough to, So my drawing is to scale. I'm going to save my drawing so I know where it is, and we'll just put it on the desktop as presentation. Okay, so at this point, I will go into my layers. I'm going to select my building just like you would in AutoCAD. Where's my drawing tool? Let's bring it back. And I am going to trace everything on my survey that I want to keep. So if I'm not going to keep keeping my walkway, I'm not going to trace it. So I'll simplify this building. So there's the house. We'll go through these steps, or I'll go through these steps and put everything on there I want to keep. Then I will produce a base sheet for myself that looks like this. Now this is my workflow. I don't do it all the time, but it's a capability you can do. I will print this out for myself and I will do just a quick hand sketch with just some basic things that, I was trained by hand, which probably most of everybody in this room was. So that's how I get my ideas out quickest. So I'll doodle something, I'll scan it in, and I will email it to a client to see if they think that's good or not, which will put me in the right direction. If everything looks good, I will bring this in. I'll make this invisible just by turning this off, and I will bring in my sketch. So here's my sketch. Now at this point, what I will do is I'll just resize my sketch, and I've done this enough to know that that back wall is about 66 feet long. So here is my dimensioned house. So now I can start tracing right over my plan. So I'm going to trace, I'll float my house over. You can bring the paper into the sheet if you want, or you can kind of do it outside the area. So I can just start tracing these. So let's put in a couple shrubs. So this is a very dynamic component library. Everything you can imagine is in here. Great graphic representation for shrubs, furniture, fireplaces, barbecues, ponds, an incredible amount of components for the landscape design industry. But as there are a lot of them, you'll just decide which ones you like to use the most, just like you do, when you're designing with your, if you're an AutoCAD or whatever. So let's just throw a few shrubs here. So I'm going to cover this one with that figure right there. Let's make these some green velvet boxwoods. So maybe we can assign a maybe 30 inches wide growth habit. Do this at 30 inches. We'll throw this in. They're all preset to sizes, but you can override them. And 99% of the time, that's what I do anyway, just because I really like to know that they're exactly what I want. So we'll bring this, we'll move that back over. Then you can really quickly copy this. Let's send some over here. And let's throw in a tree. So we'll go to trees, shade tree, trees with no shade. Let's throw this one and let's give it a 15-foot canopy. So 15, 15. We'll throw this guy in here. And let's just give ourselves a square here, which I call like the welcome court or the walkway entry. Okay. So we have some components and an area that we could color, do takeoffs. So I'm going to make this go away now. And let's just slide this in here and start getting this ready to be a final drawing. So my porch disappeared steps, that's okay. So now what I want to do is I want to start preparing this drawing to estimate, to label. And if you don't, with the Manage 360 software, if I were to start, well, let's back up. Let's group all the plants together so when we count them, they are all going to populate and we get a good exact count. This is a really dynamic feature. So let's make these green velvet boxwood. So when I'm labeling in my plants, this could almost say Manage 360. So if I were estimating out of cost books, and I were to insert green velvet boxwoods, behind that word is going to be information that I've set in the background in the cost books, which would be, okay, so a 24 to 30 inch winter gem, I'd probably put maybe 30 minutes of labor, $45 a piece. So every boxwood that I estimate on my drawing, when it goes into Manage, all that's done for you. You're not counting. You're not goofing around with an Excel spreadsheet like I did for years. So we'll get into that in a little bit. So without Manage, well, let's type in green velvet. It's going to find green velvet in this humongous database of plant material. It's normally much quicker than this, but we are dealing with a wireless hotspot. Okay, let me try it one more time. Let's see if we can get to it. Okay, good. Okay, so there's my green velvet. So I'm going to click Go. So as soon as I click these shrubs, boom, they light up, and there are my 6 green velvet boxwoods. Let's make these a steed holly. So let's type in steed. You don't have to type the whole name because it kind of thinks for you. Steed holly. 1, 2, few clicks. If I want to really be nice and detailed, I run myself a nice guideline. Okay, let's make the tree an Okami cherry. Okay, very quick. I didn't have to manually type anything in. The software counted everything. The only time it's going to make a mistake on the counting is if I didn't group things right, if I missed something. But that's why it flashes, so you can see if you missed something. So, you know, if you have a larger drawing, we're going to go through, insert all of our plant labels. Then, what do we like to do? We want to put a plant schedule on there. So, how do we do that? There's a really cool little button that says place a plant schedule. So as soon as you click it, you can decide what you want to put in there. Botanical, common. I usually don't do botanical because my clients' homeowners' heads will explode if they try to even read botanical names. So let's just stick with common names, size, and quantity. Let's not worry about size right now. As soon as I click OK, you can see what this does. The system already has default categories of the plant material. So I don't need to mess with that. Unless there's marginal plants where it could be a ground cover or a perennial, and you can establish what that is. I'm going to click OK, and I just float this wherever I want. And there's my plant schedule. It's done. At this point, I can click this and export this plant list as an Excel file. You can send it off to your nursery for pricing. So once this is all done, let's put some plant pictures in. So this is where this is not only it's design software, but I call it design and presentation software because you can really start doing some fun things with this. So it has a very powerful capability to insert my plants. So all I did was click one button, left click, and right click. So now the database is saying, okay, what picture do I have for green velvet boxwood? Or what's their picture that they've supplied? Again, instantly it would come up, but we're under the mercy. Okay. Let's try one more time because it seemed to work the first time. I did it twice. Okay, so it doesn't want to cooperate right now, but here's what it will allow me to do. Oh, there it is. Okay, that's not a bad picture of a green velvet. So I'm going to insert my image, and I'm going to put my image right there. There's my picture with a nice frame with the wording. If I want to bring in a picture of pavers, I can go into my drawing and I can insert some pictures of pavers and irrigation heads and pergolas and anything you want to showcase, because when you go in for a sales presentation, the less cumbersome the presentation is, the better. So the less stuff you bring with you, the more streamlined your presentation. So when you can bring one sheet of paper that has your design, the plan images, hardscape images, it's all there. You sit back and you relax and you let them just digest it, and it really speaks for itself. So we have a drawing now that's labeled plan images, plant schedule. So from this point, we can go a couple different directions. If we're not going to estimate it, we'll take it into modeling. Or we can color it, or we can take it into manage. But let's take this into DynaSCAPE Color. So DynaSCAPE Color is a very easy program. My 6-year-old knows how to use DynaSCAPE Color. Every plant is yellow in her drawings because that's her favorite color. So maybe when she's 8, we'll talk about color schemes. So let's open that drawing that we just worked on. So I'm going to click the button. Everything is great. You can hover over it, tells you what it is. We're going to go to desktop, and I'm going to click presentation. So here's my black and white drawing as it is right here. So I'm going to, now it's click and color. There are some really neat styles. There's a colored pencil that if you really, really like that hand look, you can color something that looks really neat. If I think I'm correct in that they had somebody literally do this all by hand and they used those swatches. So it really is hand rendered. Marker hybrid's my favorite, where it's a little bit of a mix. Or you can go with a really kind of like a funky California style, which I've seen some really neat drawings with these figures, but I just like to stick with marker hybrid. So just like in design, you're going to find those components that you like to use. Same thing with color. I know every time I do a green velvet or a winter gem, I like to use this right here. Okami cherry, I always like to use this right here. So I'll put this to the foreground. Now you can do a really neat things with this. You can play with the opacity of this tree. You can assign some shadow angles to your shrubs. I can play with the opacity and the blur. So I can really start giving some life to my drawing. Let's color in the pavers. All of these are really nice swatches that have been made. There are some real nice paver swatches. You can make your own custom pavers. I made this for the Bellegarde rep yesterday. You can use, that's Techo Block, Shale Gray, Blue 60mm. That's a really awesome way to show clients what Shale Gray will look like next to Harvest Gold, which is a really important thing to be able to convey to a customer. Let's just use a DynaSCAPE pattern. So let's color with something like, these are the good ones right here. Like, let's do that pattern. I can rotate it. I can make it bigger, smaller. So let's just stick with that. Okay, and my roof, I can either color it with a roof texture, or you can just do something really nice and subtle, like just color it in like this, fade it to the background, and it's just a really nice soft look where it doesn't overpower the drawing. So let's just save this in case the power goes out, or, you know, presentation, colored. Okay, it's going to save. This is just what happens at trade shows. So let's start it back up. But it's not a problem. So here's my colored drawing. All right, so now let's say that they decide now they want a screening hedge on the left side of the property. It's easy. Let's just say maybe it's these trees. So let's scale this up. Let's run a copy of these down. This is really, really cool what I'm going to show you, because before this, it colors very quickly, but until they came out with this feature, you'd have to manually color a drawing you'd have to recolor drawing every time with a change. But you don't have to do that anymore. All you have to do is click Update Presentation, update it to this. It's going to say, are you sure? And I'm going to say yes. And there are my trees. So anything that you've added or subtracted, well, obviously if you subtract it, it's gone. But anything you add to the drawing, it's going to come in black and white. Anything that was not changed is going to stay. So let's make a Japanese maple. That's what I use every time. Opacity, shadowing, whatever. So you will end up with a very nice color rendered drawing that I will show you in the slideshow. You can save this as a JPEG or a PDF to send off to a customer. Same thing with design. Save it as a JPEG, PDF, AutoCAD file. That's color. Everybody here probably could open a drawing and color a drawing. Hopefully. Okay, so we're finished with the color rendered drawing. That's good. Now we want to take this into DynaSCAPE Manage. Just for presentation purposes, you are also able to go in and start labeling this for hardscape as well, for pavers. So we're going to pretend now that these are all done out of our cost books, and we have some paver material in here, and we have some mulch square footages that you label. Before you send this to manage, what we'll do is we can set these into what are called work areas. This is crucial. This is a big deal because when we estimate, most of us are estimating in an a la carte format, where we're giving the front foundation planting, back pool planting, right side screen, back patio, so we can break down prices. That's what a quotation group is, or this could also say work area. So let's remove these. And we're going to just put these into different work areas. So I'm going to add front planting. It's automatically going to color code for me, so I don't need to go select colors. I'm going to do back pool, planting. This is going to make a lot of sense when we get into manage. And let's do left side screening. Okay, now what do I want in my front planting? Let's put green velvet. I'm going to go left click, right click. It changed color. When you print this out though, the line weight's not going to change. It'll still print just fine, but it's still going to be, it'll be in colors in the program. Back pool planting, let's just pretend this is the back pool planting. Left side screening, let's pretend this is left side screening. Okay, we're good. We don't want to do anymore. Okay, close, save. All right, what have we just done? What we've done is we've taken all of this information on a drawing, the plants, everything that goes into an estimate, and we've allocated it to a certain, pretty much a certain part of an estimate. So when that estimate is created, all those things go where they're supposed to go, and you're not having to manually put them there. So I'm going to recap this really quickly, and then we're going to jump into manage. So let's click here. Okay, prototype, insert your survey, import your AutoCAD survey if you want. You create your base sheet, print it out, sketch on it, bring it back into your drawing, or you can just get off to the races and start drawing. There's what it's going to look like when we've done a nice overlay on our sketch. There's what it's going to look like after it's drafted. Labeled plant schedule. Some plant pictures. There's some hardscape selections there so the customer knows that when a label points to Minicrete a 3-inch Techo block, they can follow the line and they can see exactly what everything looks like, and you're not bringing a bunch of catalogs. So we brought it into DynaSCAPE Color. There's DynaSCAPE Color. There it is in DynaSCAPE Color. Click and color. So there's a custom texture of pavers. There's some royal burgundy barberries, which everybody's saying is invasive now, so I probably shouldn't say that word, but anyway. There is a final presentation, and I've started putting like this kind of like nice subtle color in the background because it seems to soften a drawing a little bit. That's my personal preference. Obviously, you do whatever you want. And there's a really nice close-up. So, am I the best at coloring? No, but I think it conveys what I want to convey to a customer. In the residential design build, clients really like to see what things look like. So if I can show them that the hypericum with yellow flowers and the Caesar's Brothers Siberian iris has a bluish purple, I'm going to put those colors in there even though they're not flowering all the time. It really helps them see all the colors. They could care less what the plants look like. They just want nice, colorful, whatever. So it does its job successfully. There's some flower pots with red flowers in it. So you can really get detailed, nice shadowing on the steps and the little retaining wall. So, you know, this is a way sometimes to avoid getting into the modeling process when you can show them which way steps are going up and down. There's our plant labeling with all kinds of different plant material. There's our example of hardscape labeling out of Manage. And so when you're into DynaSCAPE Design, you'll go File, Export, DynaSCAPE Manage File. What that does is it bundles the drawing into this DMX file that has all the information for Manage 360. So when the DynaSCAPE salespeople give demos online for clients, they can take a couple hours. It is an extremely dynamic software program. I don't have much more time to talk. So I'm going to go through, because I want these guys to be able to talk too. I'm going to go through this in a little bit more detailed than basic manner, but we're very fortunate to have a couple of the DynaSCAPE guys here today. So if there's any questions really about the manage aspect of it, they'd be happy to answer questions afterwards. I do use it for some of my clients, but obviously I'm not entrenched with it like they are. So I don't want to make up answers. Okay, so it's a CRM program, as well as an estimating and overhead recovery system program. So when we do a design, the first step we're going to do is we're going to set up Patrick DuChene as a client, or a contact is what it's called. So we create new contact, put in their information, any kind of notes about, maybe this is their home address, but this is any notes you want to put in there. What account type, if it's a residential or commercial. Then what we're going to do is we're going to create an opportunity. An opportunity, you could think of that as a phone call. Every time that client calls you to do something else, that's an opportunity. So you're not having to reset them up every time they call you. You just create a new opportunity. So with the opportunity, this is a big deal. You can track your sales phase. The owner of a business can go in at any time and see where his designer is with his estimates by running really detailed reports. So an owner can really track the progress of sales. You can dictate what the start phase or the start date is, end date is, as far as what they're hoping for. A project budget, if you've talked about what kind of money they're able to spend, how much chance you think you're really going to get the work, you can put that information in there too. So you can run reports on percentage of probability and all kinds of cool stuff. You can track your lead sources here, which is crucial. At the end of the year, you can run reports to see where did all this work come from. Did it come from Yellow Pages, or it come from online or Facebook or trucks? You dictate that. When you purchase manage, it's not like this is going off on a tangent, but I do that. So when you buy manage, it's not like Microsoft Office. They don't hand you a disk and say good luck, call us, and Daryl from Mumbai will answer the phone if you have tech support. They have a very detailed way of there's an implementation process where you have to do some homework in the beginning as far as providing them with all of your overhead information so they can help you plug that in. So it will give you accurate estimates that recover your overhead accurately. So it's a garbage in, garbage out. If you don't put that right information as far as labor costs and insurance and truck, all that stuff that goes in behind the scenes, the better the information that goes in, the better your estimates will come out. So let's move on. So this shows you, this is a client, Colton, and these are different opportunities and estimates. So if you look at the first one, it says E12-192. So that was, let's say he called for a patio. E12-192.1 is the result of creating a new version of that estimate. So if they had an estimate where you bid wet laid bluestone, and they want a price for blue 60. I keep going back to that. But you can create a new version of that estimate. So if you have a lot of other items in there as far as plants and walls and everything else, and you just want to change those pavers, but you still want to have two different estimates so you compare them, it will create a new version without having to reinvent the wheel. So this is a really good snapshot of the different opportunities that have occurred with this client, and you can see all these estimate dates. So from that opportunity, you're going to create an estimate. When it creates an estimate, it creates this page. So this is telling you, okay, you can do anything you want now. You can add items, which is you can add trees. You can add kits, which is a kit is basically ingredients to a patio. In your cost books, you'll have every 100 square feet of pavers, you're going to need X amount of base, sand, polymeric sand, excavation time, sand installation time, disposals, all of those little things that you used to have to manually calculate are automatically done. And it automatically puts in all those things that will bleed your profits. When I got into manage, my job, I also made commissions, and my commissions increased as a result of this. Not only did the job profits increase, my commissions increased because this was recovering all those little things that I always had to remember I had to put into an estimate. So it's thinking for you because you put everything in it before. So this is what it looks like when you click Actions, Import DMX File. So this doesn't directly correspond with the drawing we did, obviously, just now. But this is what it looks like. This is all of that stuff that was on our drawing. This is what happens. It creates this estimate now. And you can see this is a really neat thing. These are all your work areas. These are, so you can see it breaks it all the way down. This particular one did it in phases. This could be your front planting, back planting, pool installation, whatever those work areas are, endless work areas. You can track down to the nitty-gritty. This is a big deal here too. See right here? That's huge. This tells you this estimate has created almost 1,600, let's say 1,640 man hours to do this job. This is really where this thing sets itself apart, because now it's telling you how to do your job. So it shows you all your costs, it shows you the price, and then at the bottom, this is where, as a salesperson, you can start manipulating numbers. So we take a proposal back and it's $262,000. And they say, because 9 times out of 10, nobody just says, okay, good. They say, oh, well, we wanted to spend $250. Or what can you do for $240? Well, the first thing you can do is you could override the $262 and you could type $250,000. There are certain ones of these you can't override. The system won't let you. So you can't get in here and accidentally override your costs. You can't override some of these. So it locks you out, which is a good thing. So when you type 250,000, it is going to recalculate your profit margin. And that's going to tell you, so if you're a client, in our industry, 15 to 20, would you say 15 to 20%? That's 20. 20 is about that net number that people like to go for profit. You as a company will decide, okay, we can maybe go down to 17, or a salesperson might have that permission to go down to that. So when you plug this in, it's going to tell you where you fall. You could also say, okay, let's cut the profit back. Let's just say we want to make 45 on it. Then it'll change your total, and it'll change your margin. So you can play with numbers without first going into changing the estimate to see what it's going to really do to your bottom line. So then we get into making an estimate. So everything is here now. Behind all this is preset kind of proposal information. Whenever you do a patio, you can have your proposal automatically say 8 inches of excavation will occur, separation fabric will be put over clay soils, yada, yada, yada. All of that stuff can be spelled out, so you don't have to be typing all that stuff. So this cuts all of that. Now we're not opening up Microsoft Word and doing all this. You're still going to have to do a little bit of this, but not a lot, so less. You can dictate, this is filtering what you really want to show in your proposal. If you want to show them the labor and materials, you can. If you want to break it down by work area, whatever. So you can really customize how your proposal is generated. And that's one of the things they also help you do when you get started, is they help you set up a nice proposal with your logo, however you wanted it formatted. So every time you click View Proposal, it'll be consistent every time. Work orders. I think work orders is a fairly, excuse me? Change orders. I'm sorry, change orders. Change orders is a very powerful feature where once you generate your proposal, you win the job, that moves over into a job now. So that estimate can no longer be changed. So if you want to add something to a job or subtract something to a job, then you'll do a change order. Change orders are kind of like subsidiary proposals where they will generate little proposals, but you can really, you're not affecting the total, the original proposal. Timesheets. This is really cool too. From all of that information in your estimate, it'll create a timesheet. You can select which crew you want to send to the job. In your cost books, you'll establish how long your work days are. It tells you how many days you need. This is kind of an example of a timesheet. All of the information that your crews are going to enter. So this is something that they would do at the end of the day. They would enter in their hours. They would enter in all the materials they used. And once that estimate, or once that timesheet is approved, it will go against job actuals. So this has not been populated, but so at any time, an owner can get on his iPad at the end of the day after the timesheets are approved, and he or she can see where you are on a job. So if you're at your job site and your crew leader says we're going to be finished in 3 days, but you get on here and they've used 90 out of 120 hours, there's a problem. So there needs to obviously be a discussion. At the end of a job, you can populate really cool graphs to show you where you did well, where you didn't. This helps you triage your job, where if you went over, you can see exactly where you went over. So let's jump into SketchUp. So what a really neat thing with DynaSCAPE is its ability to compose a design into SketchUp. So Dan's going to show you kind of a really cool. Let me get this monster out of the way.
Actually, give me the cord.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Oh, okay. You're just going to plug in there. Dan's going to show you a really unique, I don't know if you call it a plugin or whatever, but that enables you to go really seamlessly from DynaSCAPE into Sketch 3D or to SketchUp.
Thank you, Patrick. That was really informative, actually. So what you can do with DynaSCAPE it comes with an option to convert your DynaSCAPE drawing that you've created. And you can see the two options up there. First one, it cleans up the drawing for export. And that's just processing some of the line work since you have it already done for you, so it can work in a much more efficient manner in SketchUp. Then you go through the process of exporting to SketchUp format. We're not doing that because that does take a couple of minutes, but the result is very seamless. And I'm going to do this in two different ways. Then I'm going to hand it over to Mark, and Mark's going to talk about a couple other processes in terms of modeling. This is what it looks like in SketchUp. So we've gone from DynaSCAPE. It's opened it automatically for you in SketchUp. And there's a couple of things that's important to note here. In DynaSCAPE, when Patrick was drafting everything, so you draw your building lines, fence lines, paving, your plants, it's automatically populating all the individual elements onto layers, which is important when you're working with vegetation in 3D in SketchUp because you really want to be able to control your vegetation layers, especially the geometry in SketchUp. And I'll talk about that once you're in SketchUp. And here you can see there's the layers in SketchUp open to the right, and there's the drawing itself imported in SketchUp. So you're looking in SketchUp at a plan view. You can turn off the vegetation layers, and what you really need to do to model in SketchUp is start creating surfaces, and then you can extrude them, and then you apply colors to them. So the next step is using something that DynaSCAPE has created. It's a CAD to SketchUp cleanup plugin, And what it does is it automatically creates the faces for you from your 2D drawing. So that's the first part. And without the plugin, if you just imported in the CAD line work and didn't actually have this plugin or this extension, and extensions are just apps for SketchUp, that's all they really are, it would take quite a good amount of time to actually be able to create all the different surfaces and faces in SketchUp. This plugin actually automates the process for you. Next step, similar to DynaSCAPE Color, you're using a paint bucket tool. You're applying colors to surfaces. You're indicating what the surfaces might be, from any kind of ground cover to lawn to hardscape to the building footprint itself. And that's when you start using the tools in SketchUp to start extruding volumes. We're not talking about terrain here. We will include terrain as part of this presentation, but here we're just talking about flat surfaces. One of the things that's worth, if you're starting out and using SketchUp for the first time, I always encourage people, go model a simple building or house. It was designed as an architectural program. It's obviously been leveraged by just about every industry that's using it for a lot of different reasons, from Cirque du Soleil to interior designers to landscape architecture and landscape design. So building these buildings is not very difficult. There's actually extensions, again, apps for SketchUp that speed up that process. And we're not going to go over all that because that would be a really detailed presentation in SketchUp in this reality. But a lot of these components and plugins are easy to use, but really you're using the native tool set in SketchUp. And here we can start adding these details. Now, one of the things that you're seeing, like DynaSCAPE itself, it has all these preloaded native symbols that you can already use for plants, for site furniture. SketchUp does as well. And we're going to talk about that in a couple level of details here. So here we have the base plan is already modeled. We extruded the surface. We added some rocks to the front end. This was a project that Patrick and I actually worked on in tandem. That's in Michigan. At this point, Patrick's become pretty proficient where he does all this modeling on his own as part of his own workflow. And then we simply convert all the plants. You can see all the different plant symbols highlighted in the drawing. And then we're going to use something called Sketch 3D. This is part of DynaSCAPE as well. It's another package that comes with DynaSCAPE, and it comes with what we're talking about, over 1,100 different plant and components that are optimized for SketchUp use. And the result is we have a planting plan with a rich amount of detail and information in it to give us a nice aesthetic drawing that you can start presenting to your clients. So you've leveraged your DynaSCAPE drawing and Sketch 3D and with the SketchUp model to actually create this drawing. And I'm going to jump out of here and show you what Sketch 3D is. So this is the Sketch 3D site. It's on the DynaSCAPE site itself. And on the left-hand side, you could see that they've created and developed all these pre-made objects that are specific for SketchUp. So this is part of the integration that they've wanted to create and going from DynaSCAPE drawings into SketchUp itself. And they have botanic names, and there's so many plants, grasses, perennials, different types of shrubs located on this particular list. So if I'll go through perennials and grasses, and you'll notice some of these have a name. They say 2D or they say 3D. It's just telling you whether it's a 2D plant, and a 2D plant is a picture of the plant. It's just a flat surface, and when you rotate in SketchUp, it actually follows the camera. And those are optimized, and they look really good when you start doing the plant massings. Or a 3D plant is a fully articulated plant with all the geometry in it. And you can see that they have the shadows on some of them, and it gives you a nice aesthetic quality. It goes all the way from vines, water features, fencing. They've even added doors, fireplaces, different types of accessories. So it's a one-stop shop, and this is the difference. In SketchUp, there's something called the 3D warehouse. And that's a repository of millions of user-created models. The difference here, these are professionally created and optimized for your use with SketchUp, and obviously targeting the wine drinker community. Just kidding here. Just all the different types of vegetation that you can actually incorporate depending on your region or location. Obviously, when I'm working in Toronto, there's not a lot of palms. So something here that's very useful in terms of how that works. And part of the Sketch 3D, so there's SketchUp, which is the software, and then there's Sketch 3D, which is just the name for this particular library that DynaSCAPE has developed. I just want to make that distinction because it can get confusing with all the Sketch and the 3D, the DynaSCAPE color. It's just the different types of options that are available. And it also includes material textures, and one of the other ones are these plugins, and this is the DynaSCAPE Tools plugin. I'm going to demonstrate how it works actually within SketchUp in a second. And again, a plugin or an extension in SketchUp, think about it like your smartphone. Your smartphone comes without any apps. You go to the iPhone App Store or the Galaxy or Google App Store, and you can go get an app for what you want. You click the install button, and you can start customizing your devices for your use depending on what you want to do. SketchUp is very similar. There's a series of extensions or apps that you can use that are specific for landscape architecture and landscape design. And one of them is this called the DynaSCAPE Tools for SketchUp. And what it does is SketchUp sometimes has a hard time importing in CAD drawings. It tends to start adjusting or in some ways ruining the line work, especially arcs. And what this particular tool does is it cleans up the entire process for you and gives you a much more cleaner, usable drawing in SketchUp. It's always been an issue with SketchUp for the past 14 years. Obviously, that's why we create tools for SketchUp to actually streamline the process. So going into SketchUp itself, so here's the SketchUp drawing that came in from DynaSCAPE. When you go through the import-export process from DynaSCAPE, it will ask you if you want to automatically open up your DynaSCAPE drawing in SketchUp. Here you go, and you can see all the plant symbols and everything came in from DynaSCAPE into SketchUp. And just to open up the layers, you're not actually creating these layers in DynaSCAPE. When you're drafting correctly in DynaSCAPE, it's automatically doing that for you, which makes it very efficient in SketchUp because you want the ability to manage and control all these layers. And you could start turning them off to actually get to the drawing lines themselves. Just going to quickly, and you have some other information in SketchUp that lets you identify what these objects are, similar to what you can do in DynaSCAPE and leveraging that information. So it lets me turn that off. And now you can see I have my simple drawing and plan in DynaSCAPE. So the original way that you would create a model out of this drawing from an AutoCAD or from a DynaSCAPE plan is start drawing all these additional lines to create faces. It starts getting a little painful if you're doing this process in an unformatted way. So it would actually take me probably an hour, maybe a couple hours to actually create all these faces. Instead, I can select the entire drawing. I go to my plugins or my extension folder, and you can see I use a lot of different custom tools in SketchUp to speed up my modeling process. And this is all about efficiency. Everything we're talking about is really about becoming fast and creating your spreadsheets quickly. And I'm going to click on DynaSCAPE Tools, run CAD Cleanup, and what it's actually doing for me is cleaning up the drawing. And sometimes it's not perfect. You do have to go in and start cleaning it up a little bit more. I was told if I was to demonstrate this entire process, I'm boring, so I'm not actually going to do every aspect of it here. I'm going to go on to the next drawing. It doesn't take long to actually fix this process, and this is part of the educational process of using SketchUp. Instead, what we can do, and I have all these pre-made drawings here, very simple in SketchUp. You can take the paint bucket tool. This is the large tool set on SketchUp. And just as a note, if you're coming to SketchUp for the first time, these are most of the tools that come with SketchUp out of the box as a native tool. One of them is the paint bucket menu. I can start going through a materials menu here. I can select from predetermined colors and objects, again, similar to DynaSCAPE color. So in this case, I might select asphalt and concrete and start applying those colors. And hopefully I'm doing this correctly. This was Patrick's plan, and they can be hard to interpret. Just kidding. He's like, thanks. And apply these colors all the way around to what you need. And then the next thing you'll start doing is actually starting to extrude all the different surfaces to create your objects that you want to in SketchUp. So for example, here's my building. I'm going to extrude it up 10 feet. So that's using the push-pull tool, very simple to do. And for a lot of cases, you don't need to create a fully articulated actual drawing to the fullest accuracy that you want. So there's other plugins that you can use. This one's called Instant Roof. I can select my roof, and this is an extension that doesn't come with SketchUp per se, but that you can go obtain. And I can quickly select from a predetermined number of roof styles. I'm going to select one called Hacienda, click on Make Roof, and it will automatically generate the roof for me. I can even go in there and add another level of detail to this. Adding the detail. And this is part of the automated process of working in SketchUp to work with it in an efficient manner. So that's really the general purpose of how you're working with SketchUp. I'm going to show a couple of more drawings here. So here we have the next set, the next iteration. The building is done. We've started to extrude the walls. We have all the colors inputted and placed on all the different surfaces. Our steps, again, we're not talking about terrain here, but you can do terrain modeling in SketchUp, and there's a couple of different ways to do that, and Mark will actually demonstrate that in more detail. And then the next step is adding the next level of detail. And what I tend to do when I go through this workflow process, I do the vegetation last. That's the part that you might, the hardscape is really the part that you need to get nailed down first. It's going to be the part that's going to be the most unmovable, or the part you're going to change the least, versus the vegetation and some of the stonework and rocks that you're going to put in and add later. So you can see I have all my furnishings, and again, everything is still tied into this layer system in SketchUp that allows you to control and manage how it looks. And then the last drawing really is once you have all the vegetation added in SketchUp, you have your completed drawing. And that's really the general process. Now, one thing to note, why I use layers in SketchUp, and this is just an important thing if you get into this process, with all this vegetation visible in the model, SketchUp starts to slow down a little bit. That's when you can start turning off all the plant layers, and SketchUp will speed back up. And there's a workflow and process here that's useful in terms of how this can work. And ultimately what it means is, once you have all your vegetation in there, you start exporting your images, and then you turn your layers back off. And that's really, in a nutshell, this is the general purpose and how you can use SketchUp. I'm going to turn this over to Mark. I'll switch seats with you, and Mark will go through additional information about how SketchUp works.
Okay. Right. Is my microphone loud enough? Okay. So I will just touch on some of the things Daniel said. So here's an example of another plan. The line work comes in from DynaSCAPE. It's actually 3D. You can orbit, but right now it's just line work. So let's look at other things we can do with SketchUp to improve our communication of our DynaSCAPE design. So here's an example of using it as just a plan view with notations. So in SketchUp, you can notate your plant materials as well. What it's going to do is just list them by name of the component. Well, what do you call them in DynaSCAPE?
Figures.
Figures. So it lists the figure by its name. They're called components in SketchUp. And I've added shadowing to it, so you can turn it on or off. And really all that is a cheap little parlor trick, and I'll show it to you. So here's an example of using it as a colorized version. And this is, again, just SketchUp, so it's a different form of colorization than DynaSCAPE color. What I did was I just brought in each of the DynaSCAPE symbols, and then I put faces to them and colorized them. The shadowing, if I turn it off and on, is really just, like I say, a parlor trick. They're still 2D images, so they're all just floating above the plane, and the height that you give it gives you the depth of the shadow that you'll see. And so that's a way to play with the concept of 3D using 2D, if you will. Daniel talked about these are directly out of DynaSCAPE, these symbols. So I'll right click and I'll reload one of them. So we'll reload, come on. So there's the king palm, for example. So you can take the 2D file, turn it into 3D very quickly. So you can mix and match. So for instance, we'll take these and we'll just drop them down onto the surface and then go back to the top view, and our shadows now are still on. Good. So our shadows look a little more realistic with the trees. So you can mix and match 3D trees, 2D trees to get the effect that you want. So that's one game we can play with DynaSCAPE output. Let's look at some other stuff. So this same backyard, I'll show you the finished example of it. So colorizing everything, painting it with the paint bucket, as Daniel did. You can save different scenes. So the scenes are nothing more than a location and a camera position with layer settings. So I turned on the plants. I can turn them off or on. So if we turn them off, you can move around. It's a real 3D environment. It's a virtual 3D environment. So we can go back, turn the plants on or off, review the design with the client, and you can actually make walkthroughs. So you can store this as a movie file or just do it in person. I prefer the in-person part because at any point, as you're going through your walkthrough and they say, "Well, I don't quite understand," you can just back up with your mouse, or you can orbit and look at from a different vantage point. So it's live. While you're in the model, you can also drop a sky in the background, for example. So this can be saved to a MOV or AVI file and then posted on a website or sent to them or played in your meeting. Also, we could turn the shadows on to give it some added depth and feeling. The shadows take a little bit more processing time as you're working with it. So especially with all the leaves like Daniel was talking about, models can become very heavy. So just be careful as you're working. I don't work with shadows on, in other words. I just turn them on when I'm finished. Let's look at the shadow settings here. So I'm going to, right now this one, you see some green across the pool. That's just a default ground plane. So you turn that off, and that corrects this image. So you could have the shadows on and save that as a movie, and then you'll actually be walking through shaded portions of your drawing, your design, to show the client. So that's an example, start to finish, of different ways of colorizing it, different ways of using line work, deciding whether you want to do DynaSCAPE Color or SketchUp or a little bit of the two. Let's look at some other samples. So here's an example of another backyard, and this is as it comes in from DynaSCAPE. So again, it's just a 2D file with groupings and plants that came directly across and layering from DynaSCAPE. How do I dock this dumb? There we go. Is that all right? You just screwed up your machine. That's all right. This is the better way to work, Daniel. Try to get buying books, buying books. Come on. But I had it just a second ago. All right. At any rate, so we'll go. Sorry about that. I should have left good enough alone. So this is an example of bringing in some terrain, a terrain surface, and then working from the 2D onto that surface. So I'll get into how this arrived and how the magic of how that happened, but I wanted to show you just how DynaSCAPE treats these materials. So they all come across, whoops, they all come across as components or figures. So I'm going to take these and just right click and say drop them onto the surface below. So now it's taken and all those 2D symbols follow the terrain now. So we're starting to really immerse ourselves in this as if it were a three-dimensional real yard. And then we can do the same thing. We'll just reload those. Maybe we'll reload them as a dogwood. And these are just DynaSCAPE from Sketch 3D. So I didn't, pardon? 15 minutes. Oh, Sketch 3D, I didn't have to draw them. Saves you a ton of time. Well worth it. So reload another plant in here. Here's a pencil. Yeah. So you can start getting a sense of it. The rocks follow the terrain all the way down. Reload those. So now you're really getting a sense of how this backyard would be in 3D. So that's an example of just working from the two-dimensional line work. Let's look at what else we can do with it. Now this will hopefully intrigue you. So in SketchUp, you can take photographs and you can actually model from the photograph. So here's a photograph in the background, but all that geometry was created directly off, not directly, by using that photograph. And all you do is you line the photo up to the SketchUp axes, and then you draw it in, you model it in, but it's actually in 3D. And that process works really well, and you can end up with a lot of geometry very quickly that's actually very close to real. Depending on your accuracy as you're doing it, it'll be very close to real. So we add in the hardscape, as Daniel said, but then you can take and colorize it. You saw the paint bucket. Well, with SketchUp, you can also take the photograph and treat it as a paint, and it can be applied to the model. So this is an example of some colorization, but also the photograph. So when you come in here, we've added a huge richness to this model with no overhead of geometry because it's all just part of the photograph. Notice there are some areas over here that don't match the photograph. That's because this photograph's only good from one direction. It's a two-dimensional photograph. But if you're careful and you make colors, solid colors that will not distract the client, I could have gone a little darker, then you can actually talk about your plantings. That's what you're really in business for, and not the house. So the hardscape would be all your new stuff. So then you'd add your plants in. So we add those in from the top view, and then it also adds a sense of depth to it if you turn the shadows on. I've assigned the shadow setting to just a hotkey so I can turn them on and off quickly, hopefully. So that gives a little more sense of depth in reality. So this is a plan view of a 3D surface. So now we're starting to introduce 2D. You could take 2D figures, I'll get it by the end of it, and combine that with the 3D if you wanted to. So now you can discuss with your client the backyard in more detail because it's real. You can zoom in and out. You can take it from any direction. They get a good sense of how everything's affected as they move through it. So given the number of polygons of all these leaves, we're still moving along pretty well. And this gives you a sense of the quality of some 2D trees. Those are ones I made. And then the nicer stuff that you get from DynaSCAPE. And you can immerse yourself even further and actually get down at the ground level and look at it and experience the design, or the client can experience it as if they're standing on the site. So you can specify that height of where you're standing. I think the shadows are on here. We'll let it turn on. Daniel told me this was fast. So let's go back. So the neat thing is we've got it all in. We've got the plants in 3D. We've adjusted them. Remember, we started from a photograph. Well, the neat thing is you can take that same photograph, and if you've been careful about the photograph you choose, you can actually use that as a background. And once we spin around here, we reorient the model to that background, and we can use the photograph as our paint in the background. So we don't have just its generic sky. We'll have a more realistic look to it in a second. Come on. All right. So you can see that we're using the photograph. We get the haze, we get the neighbor's house, the whole bit. So it really starts looking like, and then the foreground grass from the photograph merges into fake grass because all this terrain we've created and added. And if we turn off the edges, it'll soften it even further. And so this image now can be printed out, sent to the client. Come on, turn off. And you get a very nice soft look, and it almost looks photographic to what you're wanting to show them. So that's one way to use SketchUp from a photograph. All right, I'm going to show you another thing we can do with it. We did that one. I got to thinking, how much can we do with SketchUp? So I went on the web and I just looked under landscape architecture and I found a colored site plan. So if this is yours, I would give you credit now. You can stand up because I have no idea. I just found it on the web and thought, what can we play with? So you start tracing it and you trace right over it onto a surface and it creates line work and surfaces and then you can paint those. But after we get it all painted, we can start working with the walls and the walks. So now we've got it into 3D and we're actually experiencing this as a three-dimensional height as we work on the site. And you do the hardscape first and then you draw the landscape into it, believe it or not. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. So I'll turn the terrain on and you can see I took the terrain and made it 3D and then I painted the hand rendering right onto it. So now we're cooking with gas. I mean, you can use your hand skills and add it to 3D and now it's your presentation. It's no longer generic, it's the flavor of your own hand-drawn stuff. I'll turn on some accessories and just show you. You start adding the pieces and parts in, turn shadows on, adds another sense of reality to it. So I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but let's talk a little bit more about how we do the terrain. So everybody's worked with contours, right? So you usually get that from a CAD source, possibly. Try to shrink this baby up. CAD source. So this is just line work. In this case, they already had elevation. So all we need to do is make sure we have our toolbar on. Yeah, where are we? Oh, it's totally off?
Go to
extensions.
window extensions.
Sorry, technical difficulties. All right, pretend like none of that happened. So where are they? Okay, so we can just select all these lines and ask SketchUp to please give us a surface that represents those lines. And what it's doing is reading all the vertices and creating a surface for us. So this surface is 3D, but it's represented, all the points are coming directly from all that input. But now within SketchUp, we can play with that further. So there's this, what we call a smoother tool, and we'll just set it to 100 feet. Come on. What happened to this really fast computer?
She thought we were using wrong.
Okay, so we can click on this, and what it does is allows you to adjust this terrain as if it were a single surface. So I'm just exaggerating it to show you, but then we double click and we can just go around and model and change this terrain. We can even push it downwards. So once you have the terrain, you can actually still play with it. And all those changes as you dump your paint onto it will react, so it'll still look like your hand rendering, but it'll be a steeper hillside. So let's look at how that works. So quite often you will not, okay. Here's your views, come on. Don't you use standard views, Daniel?
Right click on the top views.
Okay. So quite often you'll have to generate your own diagrams. So let's draw in just a, let's do 125 foot by 75 foot rectangle just to have a sense of scale. So you can, pardon? You can draw this in And you'll know from the client meeting how the terrain is. So you just rough it in. If you've taken spot elevations, use them. But I'm just going to rough in some terrain here. And then using push-pull, you simply give it a stepped model and you can work from there. But that's a little bit cumbersome. So there are some plugins, and this is one of them that help with that. It's a foam core plugin. So we'll just tell it we want 24-inch spacing. And now as you click it, you just keep clicking and it keeps incrementing it upwards. So you can create your stepped model very quickly. Oops. And then I'll pull these up, and then we'll just use it in reverse. So we'll tell it minus 24, and now it'll decrement. It's supposed to. Minus 24, and now it'll go down. So once you've got it set up, you just select it all, and you ask SketchUp to give you a surface from that. And that surface, again, is a real 3D surface, and you can adjust it from there. If you want to play with it again, we'll make it 15 feet. So let's say we change this again and we modify it. Once you've modified it, you can take that surface and send it to another plugin that'll recreate the contours for you. So we'll do it as 12-inch contours. And there's your contours. If we hold that over the original, you can see where you've actually changed it and made it go up, increase the height. But these contours now can be sent to your engineer for grading plans and such, and work it from there. I think I'm running out of time, so let's just look at that last. Oh, do I still have 10? Mm-hmm. Oh, great. Sorry. Okay, so there's one more thing I wanted to show you. Okay, so we'll bring in, say, a house. Uh-oh. Where's our stuff? Get me to it. Where are we? Whoops, sorry. That's okay. We won't do the house part. We'll just draw. Okay, I'm off here. Let's try something else. That's okay.
You're done with one.
Yeah, I got it. Just have to. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. That's okay. We'll do this one instead. So here's an example of a simple parkway. So let's create some terrain from that. So I'll just copy it up in the air, and I'm going to push-pull these walls up about the same amount, because what we're doing is we're going to create it above that. So on the wall behind, I can just draw the shape of how the ground hits that wall in the background. And then select that and select my edge here, and then ask SketchUp to give me a surface between them. And it creates the surface in 3D, and I can adjust that and clean it up because it does a 1-for-1 on all the vertices. So wherever the arc is flat, when it's minor cleanup, and then you're left with curving terrain. You just paint it. But let's back up and let's slope the walk, because obviously the world's not flat. So let's go ahead and give this an incline to the sidewalk. And now we'll do the same thing and select those surfaces, those edges, and ask SketchUp to give us the terrain between them. And now we actually have an approximation in 3D of that site, and it took us a matter of minutes to generate it. So we can do the same thing, and we'll draw another set of arcs on the other wall. And you're the designer, so you design it however you want. But you select those and ask SketchUp to give you the surface between, and then paint it on there. Now as we go in and we drop our trees and stuff on there, you're actually immersed in that 3D environment. And that's very quick and easy. So that's essentially how this was done with the hand-drawn example. So I took and I drew along all those walkways that you saw when we talked about doing the sidewalk or the hardscapes first, and then you draw along the edge of these walls the profile you want to work your way up the hill, and you work your way out to, I went to 0 on the side, but if you knew what the neighbor's lot was, you would use those as the place to merge to, and it would walk all the way down. So you can actually fully experience this site with the client, and you can adjust the yard as you need to. Again, I made all this up, but I think this is probably what it must have looked like. So, and then once you have it all in place, you add the plants. And since shadows are on, it'll take a second, but you end up with a really nice communication tool with some DynaSCAPE plant, some hand-drawn, some SketchUp generated geometry, and you put it in a bag, shake it all up, put a background of clouds, and you end up with your presentation. It'll come. So go ahead.
So we'll open up questions and answers. If you guys have any questions, please let us know. Go ahead.
Well, thank the panel for the wonderful presentations. A quick question is, could you show us how to use scales and line widths in DynaSCAPE? Do you say I'm going to do a very quick show for printing for scales? Because you show us the type block, where you say I want to print that 24 by 36 or small document in the scale.
Sure.
Okay, let's just say we're going to print this drawing. So to know what page what sheet size we have, we go up to drawing page, 1 inch equals 10 by 24 by 36. Okay, so let's print out a 24 by 36. So tell me if I'm not answering your question or not. But File, Save As, Adobe PDF. Then what it's going to say is, okay, where do you want to put the drawing? Let's put it on that. Print test. Save. Now it's going to say what size. I'm going to say landscape orientation, 24 by 36. Click OK. It'll generate the PDF. And then I'll just go to the desktop. And there's it's coming. There's my drawing. So whenever you save a drawing, it's going to ask you what size you want to save that sheet to. I could have saved that to an 8.5 by 11 and really reduced it, but that's up to you as far as how small you want this to reduce to be able. Did I answer your question? Oh, okay. So in these are your layers. All your layers, you see the width and the weight? These are all preset. But if you want to go in and make your own, or if you want to go and change them, you can do that. I don't do it because I've been very happy with them, but you can make your own layers that you'd like to be able to turn on and off, or maybe match with somebody else that you work with, right?
Which was the layer button.
So the layer, if you hover over it, it looks like layers of paper. Display the drawing list. So you just double click it, and there's all your layers. So you can do the same thing like CAD. I can go shut things down. I can turn them on and off as much as I want. So when you when I bring in a CAD file, the first thing I'll do is get rid of all the toilets and all that stuff that I don't need, and just work with the building footprint, the topos and property line. Okay.
You had made a comment on the advantage about using it in conjunction with an iPad.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that DynaSCAPE is not a Mac-based program, how would that work?
Easily. You just copy the link onto your, if you're going to use Chrome, well, no, they use Safari. You just put that shortcut right on your iPad, and you log in just like you would on your computer. It's cloud-based. You can. I've done estimates on my phone before. It's pretty slick.
Any more questions? Go ahead.
Quick question, Patrick. Another one. DynaSCAPE seems like it's really great for visualization and job processing. A lot of the lens partners use custom hardscape design construction.
Mm-hmm.
Can you do that in DynaSCAPE?
You can. I mean, that's a matter of drafting. There are some preset construction documents in here, details for like deciduous trees, if you want to throw one of those on your drawing. There are some that Unilock has supplied. You can always go in and override that and make it say TechoBlock or whatever. So there is a selection of them that you can put, or you can draw them as. Yeah, you can. You'd explode them, play around with them, and then just resave them and save them as a figure. You know, you can create your own figures also. So if you use Eldorado kitchen modules and you want to have all those modules saved so you can just lock them in place in a design, you can save those too. So you could essentially have somebody draw details as you want them, save them as figures, and then install those on all your users' computers, and then everybody's using the same figures also.
All right, thank you very much.